The African night serpent that eats elephants. Part 1. The warnings no one listened to. There are places on Earth where the night does not feel empty. Places where the darkness seems to press inward. Where the forest breathes differently. Where animals fall silent not because they are asleep, but because they are listening. Central Africa is one of those places. For centuries, villages scattered along the great forests of the Congo Basin have spoken of a creature so vast that even elephants fear it. A serpent that does not hunt in daylight. A serpent that does not strike quickly. A serpent that waits. They call it many names. Some translate loosely as the one that folds the forest. Others simply call it the eater of giants. Western science dismisses these stories as exaggeration. Folklore. Fear given shape. But buried in journals, colonial logs, missionary letters, and modern incident reports is a disturbing pattern. One that suggests the stories may not be myths at all. This is the first part of the investigation into what some now call the African night serpent. Chapter 1. The elephants that vanished. In 1907, British colonial officers stationed near the Kasai River began recording something unusual. Entire elephant herds were disappearing. Not migrating. Not hunted. Not leaving tracks. Gone. Captain William Hargreaves, an officer with the King's African Rifles, wrote in his personal journal that the local trackers refused to follow the trails after sunset. One tracker, a man named Badu, reportedly dropped his spear and backed away from the forest edge, saying in a low, urgent voice that the ground was too quiet. Hargreaves initially dismissed this as superstition, but his tone changed days later when scouts discovered something deeply unsettling. A massive clearing had appeared overnight. Trees bent inward. Saplings snapped cleanly at mid-height. The earth flattened in a long, curved depression stretching more than 100 meters. There were no footprints, no blood, no tusks, only the unmistakable scent of crushed vegetation and something else, something musky, heavy, and unfamiliar. An older tracker stared at the clearing for a long time before speaking. He said quietly that an elephant does not disappear unless something larger has decided it should. Chapter 2. The Old Warnings. Long before European boots touched the soil, indigenous communities along the Congo and Ubangi rivers told stories of a night-moving serpent that did not coil in trees or sun itself on rocks. Elders spoke of a creature older than the forest itself. They said it sleeps beneath the earth, beneath river bends, beneath places where the ground sinks slightly underfoot. They warned that when elephants walk too often across certain paths, the ground wakes. One elder, interviewed in the 1930s by a Belgian missionary, explained in a calm but serious voice that the serpent does not chase prey. It waits until the weight is right, he said, when the ground remembers the pressure. According to the elders, the serpent hunts only once or twice in a lifetime, but when it does, it feeds for days. Children were warned never to follow elephant trails at dusk. Hunters were taught to listen for a sound like wind moving underground, not above. These were not stories told for entertainment. They were survival instructions. Chapter 3. The Missionary's Letter. In 1912, Father Etienne Moreau, a French missionary stationed near Lake Tella, wrote a letter that was never intended for publication. It was addressed to his superior in Brazzaville. In it, he described an incident that deeply disturbed him. One evening, villagers came to the mission in visible distress, claiming that something had taken an elephant cow and her calf near the river. Father Moreau accompanied several men to the site the following morning. What he found defied explanation. The ground was pressed down in a wide, continuous arc, as though a massive object had been dragged, or had dragged itself, through the clearing. Several trees bore long scrape marks, not from tusks, but from something smooth and heavy sliding past them. Moreau wrote that one of the men knelt and placed his ear to the soil. After a moment, the man stood up abruptly and whispered that he could still hear movement, slow, deep, and far below. That night, Father Moreau recorded that he could not sleep. He wrote that the forest went unnaturally silent shortly after sunset. No insects, no birds, no distant animal calls. Only once, near midnight, did he hear something that chilled him. A deep, rhythmic sound, not quite a hiss, not quite a breath, moving slowly past the mission grounds. He described it as the sound of something enormous passing beneath the world. Chapter 4. The Hunter Who Saw It. One of the earliest first-hand sightings comes from a professional ivory hunter named Samuel Whitaker, whose account was recorded in a private memoir recovered decades later. Whitaker had spent years tracking elephants across Central Africa. He prided himself on knowing the forest intimately. In his memoir, he recalled a night in 1923 when he and two porters camped near a river bend known locally as the Folding Place. Shortly after nightfall, the porters became restless. One of them said in a strained voice that the ground felt wrong beneath his feet. Whitaker ignored the warning. Around midnight, he awoke to a strange sensation, a subtle vibration traveling through the soil. Then came the smell. He described it as thick, damp, and ancient, like rotting leaves mixed with wet stone. Suddenly, the forest ahead of the camp began to move. Not animals. The trees themselves shifted. Whitaker said he watched, frozen in terror, as a massive, dark shape passed between the trunks. It was not fully visible, but he could see enough to understand its size. The body was wider than an elephant's torso. Its movement was slow, deliberate, unstoppable. He wrote that it did not slither like a normal snake. Instead, the ground rose and fell as it passed, as though the earth itself were being folded. One of the porters screamed. The sound stopped abruptly. Whitaker ran. He did not return to the site until morning. There was no sign of the porter. No blood, no struggle, only a long, flattened trail leading toward the river and into the water. Chapter 5: Denial and Silence. By the 1930s, reports of missing elephants and strange forest disturbances were quietly accumulating. Colonial administrations dismissed them as exaggerations caused by poaching, disease, or miscounted herds. Scientists argued that no snake large enough to prey on elephants could exist. The biology didn't support it. The ecosystem couldn't sustain it. And yet, the reports never stopped. Trackers continued to refuse certain routes. Villages relocated without explanation. Hunters vanished along known elephant paths. Whenever officials pressed locals for details, the answers were always the same. The serpent does not like being spoken of. One colonial officer reportedly laughed at this explanation, until his patrol found a bull elephant dead near a riverbank, its body intact, but its ribs crushed inward, as though something immense had wrapped around it. The officer's report was filed and never discussed again. Part 1: Closing narration. By the mid-20th century, the African night serpent had faded from official records, but not from memory. It lived on in whispers, in warnings passed quietly from elder to child, in paths left unexplored after sunset, and in the growing realization that something in the forest did not want to be found. Because whatever this creature is, it does not belong to the past, and it may still be feeding. When modern science met an ancient hunger, by the middle of the 20th century, the world believed it had mapped the unknown. Satellites watched the skies. Radios pierced the jungle. Science claimed dominion over mystery. But the Congo Basin remained one of the last places on Earth where the forest still decided what could be seen and what could disappear. And it was here, in the age of engines and instruments, that the old stories began colliding with modern reality. Chapter 6: The Military Patrol. In 1958, a joint Belgian, Congolese patrol was dispatched to investigate repeated reports of missing elephants near the Likula swamps. The mission was routine on paper: survey the area, confirm signs of poaching, reassure local settlements. Lieutenant Marcel DeWitt, who led the patrol, recorded his observations in an after-action report that remained classified for decades. According to DeWitt, the patrol found no evidence of traps, gunfire, or human interference. Instead, they encountered something far worse. Near a shallow river bend, they discovered the remains of a fully grown bull elephant. The body was intact, the skin unbroken, the tusks untouched, but the chest cavity had collapsed inward. DeWitt later stated in an interview that the pressure required to crush an elephant's ribcage without puncturing the hide would exceed that of any known predator. One soldier, Corporal Mbala, stared at the carcass and said in a hushed, trembling voice that this was how the elders described the serpent's kill. That night, the patrol established camp nearby. Shortly after dusk, the radio began to malfunction. Static drowned out all communication. The air grew unnaturally still. DeWitt wrote that the ground began vibrating just before midnight, not violently, but steadily, like a distant engine moving underground. A sentry screamed. When the others reached his post, they found his rifle lying on the ground, bent slightly inward, as though it had been pressed under immense weight. The sentry himself was never recovered. At dawn, the patrol withdrew. The incident was officially attributed to desertion. Chapter 7. The Scientist Who Laughed. In the early 1960s, Dr. Harold Carrington, a respected herpetologist from Oxford, arrived in Central Africa to study large reptile myths. He came with skepticism, and he made no effort to hide it. Carrington stated openly that tales of elephant-eating serpents were biologically impossible. In a recorded lecture years later, he admitted that his attitude changed during his third expedition. He described standing at the edge of a swamp shortly before nightfall, examining what he assumed was erosion damage. Then the erosion moved. Carrington later recalled in a shaking voice that the water began rising in a slow, deliberate line. Vegetation bent downward. Trees leaned inward as though pushed from below. He said the shape beneath the surface was wider than any anaconda on record. At one point, the water broke briefly. What emerged was not a head, but a section of body. Dark, smooth, scarred. Carrington whispered that it was not coiled. It was straight, and it was still moving. He fled the site immediately and terminated the expedition. When asked years later why he never published his findings, Carrington replied quietly that no journal would accept them, and that he preferred sleeping without remembering what he had seen. Chapter 8. Aerial Sightings. In 1974, a reconnaissance pilot flying over the northern Congo recorded something unusual on film. The footage, later declassified, shows a long disturbance moving through dense forest canopy. Trees bent in sequence. Clearings formed and vanished. A trail nearly 3 kilometers long appeared over the course of minutes. Analysts initially attributed the footage to wind or landslides. But one technician noticed something unsettling. The movement followed a curved, deliberate path, and it changed direction. In the audio track of the film, the pilot's voice can be heard going quiet before he mutters that nothing that large should be moving that way. Shortly afterward, the aircraft experiences turbulence despite clear skies. The footage ends abruptly. The official explanation blamed thermal anomalies. Privately, some analysts referred to it as the Serpent track. Chapter 9. The Elephant Carcass Studies. By the 1980s, conservationists began documenting a disturbing trend. Elephant carcasses were being found far from known predator zones. These elephants had not been hunted. They had not starved. They had not been attacked by lions or humans. Their bones told a different story. Multiple necropsies revealed crushed spines, compressed rib cages, and internal damage consistent with extreme constriction. One veterinarian stated in a recorded interview that the force required would exceed even that of the largest known anaconda by several orders of magnitude. When asked what could cause such damage, the veterinarian paused before saying that if the reports were accurate, the animal responsible would have to be longer than a football field. The interviewer laughed nervously. The veterinarian did not. Chapter 10. The Satellite Anomaly. In 1999, a satellite imaging system designed to track vegetation shifts detected something unusual near the Congo, Central African Republic border. A long, slow-moving thermal anomaly appeared beneath dense jungle canopy. It was not fire, not water, not human activity. The anomaly persisted for nearly 6 hours, shifting position gradually before disappearing beneath a river system. One analyst described it as resembling a massive, warm-blooded shape moving underground or just beneath the surface. The data was archived and quietly forgotten. Years later, when reviewed by independent researchers, one note attached to the file stood out. Pattern consistent with movement, not environmental change. By the dawn of the 21st century, the African night serpent had crossed an invisible line. It was no longer just a story whispered in villages. It was no longer just a warning passed from elder to child. It had left marks that technology could not ignore. And yet, it remained unnamed, unclassified, unacknowledged, because to admit its existence would mean accepting a terrifying truth, that something ancient still moves beneath the forest, that it hunts not out of hunger, but out of instinct older than memory. And that even now, the largest land animals on Earth can vanish without a trace. By the early 2000s, the forests of Central Africa were no longer as untouched as they once were. Roads cut through ancient trees, Heavy machines pressed into soil that had not felt metal in millennia. And with each vibration, something beneath the ground seemed to stir. If the night serpent was real, then humanity was about to walk directly into its territory. Chapter 11. The Logging Operation. In 2003, a multinational logging company established operations near a remote tributary of the Sunga River. The area was considered geologically stable. No fault lines, no sinkhole risks, no history of seismic disturbance. On the 6th week of operations, workers reported strange occurrences. Machinery stalled without explanation. Fuel tanks vibrated while engines were off. The ground occasionally trembled, gently, rhythmically. One foreman later said in a hushed voice that it felt like standing on the chest of a sleeping animal. The incident occurred shortly before dawn. Workers described hearing a deep, resonant sound. Not a roar, not a rumble, but something closer to breathing. Then the ground collapsed. A section of forest floor sank nearly 2 meters, swallowing equipment, trees, and one entire transport vehicle. Survivors reported seeing something move beneath the soil before the collapse. A massive, dark shape shifting sideways, as if adjusting its body. Rescue teams found no bodies. Only compressed metal and soil packed unnaturally tight, as though pressed by an enormous weight. The operation was shut down within weeks. Official reports blamed unstable ground. Unofficially, workers refused to return. Chapter 12. The Man Who Saw the Head. In 2011, a wildlife tracker named Joseph Makalo agreed to give an interview under strict anonymity. Makalo had spent over 30 years navigating the Congolese rainforest. He knew elephants. He knew crocodiles. He knew snakes. What he described, he said quietly, belonged to none of those categories. Makalo explained that he was tracking an elephant herd that had suddenly scattered. The forest had gone silent, birds gone, insects quiet, even the wind absent. He followed disturbed ground toward a shallow ravine. That was when he saw it. Makalo said the creature's head was partially exposed above the soil, resting motionless. He described skin dark as wet stone, eyes recessed and unblinking, and a width greater than the height of a man. He whispered that the head alone was wider than his canoe. Makalo said he stood frozen, unable to breathe, as the ground around the creature subtly shifted, not coiling, not striking, but adjusting, as if aware. Then one eye moved. He said it did not blink. It watched. Makalo fled and never returned to that region. When asked why he finally spoke out, he replied that people keep asking where the elephants go, and someone needs to tell the truth. Chapter 13. The Elephant Graveyard That Wasn't. In 2015, conservation drones recorded a cluster of elephant remains deep within a restricted zone. Initially thought to be a poaching site, investigators were puzzled by the findings. There were no bullet wounds, no snares, no human footprints. The elephants appeared to have died over several years, in the same general area. Their bones showed consistent compression damage. One investigator stated that the ground itself seemed compacted, as though repeatedly pressed downward by immense weight. Local guides refused to approach the site. One elder explained in a low voice that this was not a graveyard. It was a feeding ground. Chapter 14. The Ancient Explanation. Anthropologists studying regional folklore uncovered a recurring detail across multiple tribes. The serpent was never described as roaming freely. It slept. Buried deep beneath riverbeds and forests, it moved only when disturbed, or when the balance of the land shifted too far. According to these traditions, the serpent predates the rivers themselves. The rivers formed around it. One elder stated calmly that the serpent does not hunt elephants because it needs to. It hunts them because they wander too close. Chapter 15. Why it remains hidden. Despite decades of sightings, reports, and physical evidence, no official classification exists. Why? Because acknowledging such a creature would challenge fundamental assumptions. That megafauna of that size cannot exist unnoticed. That unexplored ecosystems are no longer possible. That modern science has closed the age of monsters. One researcher summarized it bluntly. If it's real, then the world is still wild in ways we refuse to accept. Final narration. The night serpent waits. Tonight, somewhere beneath the African rainforest, the ground may still be breathing. Elephants still vanish. Forests still shift. Rivers still curve unnaturally in places no map explains. And the elders still warn their children not to walk where the soil feels warm at night, because some predators do not chase. They wait. And if the African night serpent ever rises fully above ground, it will not be because it is hungry. It will be because something woke it. Thank you for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it just as I did. Remember to subscribe to the channel and click on the like button for more. I hope you learned some valuable lessons from this video today. See you in our next video.